Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another live at the Waterhole show with Wilder and African. And we've started at Bunkoro Bush Lodge, where we have some rather frantic elephants, it seems, and a beautiful saddle-billed stork. Not sure what bothered the elephants there. But my name is Ben Coley. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours as we enjoy some of the wonderful sights and sounds of the African bush from a variety of locations across southern and eastern Africa. This is a live and interactive show as always, so please do send in your questions, your comments, and anything else that you'd like to know. And as always, I will do my absolute best to answer those questions as and when they come in. But that was a very quick appearance of the elephants. You could just see some right in the distance, just running away. I'm not sure what gave them such a fright, but it seems that they didn't want to hang around. But that's okay. It seems to have relaxed a little bit, but yeah, something bothered them for sure. I still see them moving quite quickly in the distance. Good idea just to check that there isn't anything else that caused that reaction. Maybe there was a musting bull on his way in, or possibly some people, because at Nkoro it is quite close to the lodge. So maybe a vehicle came past. Remember, elephants are very relaxed with game drive vehicles. But vehicles that they are unfamiliar with could provoke a certain type of reaction. They also learn the sound and pitch of particular engines with which that they have had issues with in the past. I've seen that before. So certain cars that, for example, have been used in dartings or veterinary exercises, if they always use the same car, the elephants will know the pitch of that car's engines versus a different car's engines, and it will provoke a very different reaction. Clever things. Lovely to see what I'm pretty sure is a saddle-billed stork. Yes, definitely a saddle-billed stork. You can see where the name comes from. There's that definite black saddle across the bill. Very special bird. Massive wingspan of about 3 meters in flight. And I think one of the most iconic and beautiful birds that anybody can see on a trip to Africa. Now, if we can get a good enough look at this bird's eye, we would be able to sex it. So it's one of the main um, differences between the two sexes is the eye color. So if we could put her head or his head parallel to us, if we see a bright yellow eye, then it's a female. And if it's a dark eye, it's a male. And there'll also be a sort of a little bottle under the chin if it is a male. Difficult to see in the light. Lovely bird, probing around for anything. We saw it grab something a little bit earlier. I didn't see what it was. But let's go and have a quick look at the weather for today, and we'll come back to our store. Well, we won't be going back to our store. We've shot all the way up to Kenya to El Donio Lodge and enjoying this beautiful elephant bull. Oh, got small tusks compared to a lot of the elephants that we've seen here. But having a nice drink. This waterhole, of course, yesterday was scene of a fabulous sighting with probably somewhere around, I would estimate around 80 or so zebras all having a drink. And arguing with one another. That was very entertaining to watch. Look at this beautiful boy. So we were having some discussions yesterday about aging an elephant by looking at its head. So you can see this one is fairly broad across the forehead, across the bridge of the nose, and you can see those characteristic dimples in the side of the temples, not super depressed in terms of how sunken they are. I have no idea of the elephant's mood at the moment. But certainly not a fully grown adult elephant. Probably I would estimate around the late 20s to early 30s mark as an educated guess. Thanks, Tobing. A beautiful elephant indeed. I love watching those wrinkles on the trunk move and sort of undulate around as the trunk is flexed and moved up to the mouth. You see all of those tens of thousands of muscles, those rings of muscles, all working in unison. It's very pretty to watch. A bit like kinetic art. Nice to see all these birds watching the elephant as well. So my birding knowledge of Kenya is not great, but they certainly look something along the lines of wattled starlings, or certainly something from the starling family. Nobody seems to be having a drink though. Quite happy just watching this magnificent bull elephant have a drink, hopping around. Okay, well, there's a better close-up of these birds. Certainly a dove, a ring-necked dove of some description. Well, they certainly look like the sort of juvenile young wattled starlings that we get down in southern Africa, but I will bow to anybody's East African bird knowledge, which will definitely be superior to mine. The time that I spent in Tanzania, strangely in my eyes, there's kind of a line that goes across Tanzania, and everything south of that line is very similar in terms of the bird life that we get in southern Africa, and then you go across that line and it all changes completely. So what is up in the northern parts of Kenya and Tanzania is very different from the southern parts. It's one of my little regrets that I did spend a year up there, but I never got a chance to visit the crater or head up to the Serengeti. It was literally as far away from where I was stationed as it was possible to get, and was sort of a 2 day journey. And because we were so remote, I was down there at the camp And when it was time for the end of the season, because we did long seasons there, we did 5 months on, 2 months off, 4 months on, pretty much for the course of the year. When you got the call to close down the camp, that took a few days. And then flights were booked, and he went pretty much straight to the airport. There wasn't a great deal of time for sightseeing, unfortunately, but hopefully one day I will get an opportunity to visit that area and spend a little bit more quality time up there. It's a very photogenic elephant, this one, so he may not have the biggest tusks in the world, but here flaps scaring the birds. But I like the way he's been standing there. Ah, here we go. Standing there with those ears outspread most of the time. From a photographic perspective, always better to try and photograph an elephant with his ears open instead of pinned back against the side of the head there. Just looks far more imposing and interesting subject in a picture. A little bit of respect being shown by the one on the right. Now, this is an older elephant. We could guess that with the size of the tusks, but if you just look at the size of the head in comparison, it looks like a bigger, more sturdy head on this elephant. Oh, the left has quite an angular forehead, which is often more suggestive of a female, but that's definitely a male. We were saying yesterday that it is more of a rule of thumb, that forehead shape. It's slightly more domed than that of a female. DDG are asking the physical indications that one bull is more dominant than another. Well, in the elephant world, size is very, very important. A bigger elephant will almost always be more dominant over a smaller one. A lot of it will also be done by olfactory cues, this chemoreceptive um, nature that the elephants pick up from one another using those vomeronasal nasal organs, the organ of Jacobson, all the hormones contained in the bodily secretions within the urine, within the dung, and definitely a musting bull elephant will dominate a non-musting bull elephant. Um, Physical indications, really, it's body language. You'll see an elephant will know it's more dominant, and it has sort of a strut. It has a self-confidence that's very difficult to explain, but you'd know it when you'd see it. And you just watch the interactions between the two. You saw how that's the one that's now left vacated the area, made space for this bigger, in my opinion, that this bigger, more older, and thus more dominant bull. But there's a lot of respect to one's elders within elephants as well. The size of the tusk doesn't necessarily mean dominance. It's visually more impressive and potentially would give an animal like this an advantage if it actually came to a physical conflict for obvious reasons. But just having big tusks is not necessarily a sign of dominance. To sort of change the conversation slightly, of course, there's been a lot of concern over all the dehorning of the rhinos and whether removing the horn is going to play or have any significant role in stopping a bull rhino from being able to hold its territory because it's lost its major sort of fighting weapon. But studies have shown that it doesn't seem to thus far at least. Obviously, we only have a small sample size, but it doesn't seem to have affected things as much as we thought it might. There are many stories of rhinos that have been dehorned, being territorial and successfully defending that territory against rhinos that have been dehorned. So a lot of it is, say, through body language, through confidence, through pheromones, and I suppose you could call it self-belief. A beautiful tusk, this one. Lovely and symmetrical. Looks like he's going to dip his back foot in the water, a little itchy toe, perhaps. Mhm. Saw him scratching his back leg with that foot earlier, and I assumed that it was an itch on the leg, but maybe he's got an itchy toenail. Okay, well, that was a lovely view of those two elephants coming down to have a drink. But I think we're going to head back over to Nkoro and let's go back and have another look at that spectacular saddle-billed stork if he's still around. Ah, it is good. Maybe we can get a better look at that eye colour. I didn't notice a wattle, the little yellow sort of little bit of skin that hangs down underneath the beak, which you would only find in a male, so possibly a female. But yeah, if we can get a close up of its eye, bright yellow eye is the lady, dark eye is the male. Easy to remember. It's a little bit like the females are wearing eyeshadow, a little bit of makeup around the eye for that brighter coloured eye. Sounds of virtual starling. Oh, we've got something. What's he got? A platana, maybe. Or sort of an aquatic frog. Now they do give sort of have a very sort of mucousy secretion on them, which is a little bit toxic. Yeah, definitely an amphibian. So often you'll see that they'll sort of shake them off in the water. Definitely looks like a platana. Just try and clean off some of those secretions. Yeah, that looks like a yellow eye, I think. Oop, down the hatch. You'll find all sorts of morsels down there. Lots of platanas particularly, but even freshwater crabs and mussels. Plenty of arthropod life there, and there'll be lots of little fish swimming around in there. I was actually looking over some of my old footage from my time at Juma, and I came across the day that Tess and I had a mud wallow in one of the water holes there, or one of the seasonal pans. And I found a freshwater crab, which worried me somewhat. And then we also fished out a water scorpion and had a look at that. So it was, we kind of forget that there's so much happening out of sight, out of mind. Huge ecosystem beneath that rippling surface. It's very nice to see the stork catch a platana. Well, something there. See all those ripples disappearing in front. Maybe a little catfish or something, a small one that might have been flitting across the mud underneath. Stella, you're asking about a blue-backed bird. Are they a type of stork? Um, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by blue-backed stork. We do get various species of blue-backed birds. Sorry, we do get various species of stork in southern Africa. I'm trying to think if I can think of any that have a definite blue back. Um, the blue crane is the national animal of South Africa, but as the name suggests, that is not a stork, it's a crane. Similar, large bird, but isn't a stork per se. I'm trying to think if there are any storks that have a just blue coloration. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah, I can't think of any storks that have blue backs. We have something called a glossy ibis, which I suppose is stork-like. It has like a long decurved beak, and they probe around in the grass and in the muddied areas. That has a sort of a lovely purplish sheen to it. We are blessed with a fantastic diversity of bird life down in southern Africa. So over 900 species that you could potentially tick off. Although very much a labour of love to be able to get all of them. That has been done by some. But very nice to see a platana, although in rather unfortunate circumstances for that platana. They are funny things when you see them. They've got very stumpy legs, you might have seen there. They certainly don't hop around like a traditional frog. They sort of crawl, and you can actually see platana tracks or a crawling frog tracks. We've identified those before. The most famous thing about platanas, which some of you may have known or may already know, is that they were used for many years as part of a very reliable pregnancy test. So up until I think it was around about the 1950s, there was no reliable scientific way to test for pregnancy. But one of the ways that it was done was using frogs because of their um, the absorbent nature of their skin. that can absorb toxins and absorb oxygen out of the water. By exposing the platana's skin to the urine of a pregnant woman, that would induce, usually within only a few hours, the frog to produce eggs. The hormones contained within that urine would be absorbed. That would cause hormonal changes within the frog and stimulate the frog to produce eggs. And that was a surefire way to determine whether somebody was pregnant or not. And it was used throughout the world, as far as I know, for many, many years. It was only in the 50s or so that we developed better ways that didn't subject frogs to being urinated on. I'm sure the Platana community celebrated wildly at that discovery. Thank you, Cosmic Carol. Thank you for joining us from a sunny and breezy Wales. At least it's sunny over there. And I like your name, of course, Cosmic Carol. Anything to do with stars and space, as many of you know, one of my real passions. I'm very excited that I'll soon be sharing some new astro photos because I treated myself to a new equatorial tripod for better, more accurate long exposures. So I'm very excited once I get a nice little patch of weather and some time to get out there and gather hours and hours of photographs of ridiculously distant yet beautiful cosmic phenomena. Always very special to see a saddle-billed stork. They are considered uncommon in terms of their status. The global population may be around about 20,000 mark, but they do estimate that there's only about how many is it in Kruger Park? Well, they reckon 50 to 100 pairs in South Africa, most of which are found in Kruger National Park, which has always baffled me because 50 to 100 pairs, that's between 1 and 200 birds in the entirety of the Kruger National Park. Yet I have been perhaps very fortunate to seen many saddle-billed storks. It's always exciting to see one. But if those figures are true, then I guess I should count myself lucky, although because that's not a very big number of birds to be found in such a large area. Evidently, that platana did not satiate the appetite of the stork, still hungrily probing for food. You can definitely see some other ripples in the lake, possibly some little bubbles of air, maybe a little catfish surfacing for some air. That'd be a nice little meal for the stork if it was close enough and not too large. But I think we'll leave our stork in peace as it continues hunting. We're going to head up to Madikwe to Tau, see what's happening up there. Tau, as normal, proving to be a nice source of congregation of animals. Got some waterbuck, some zebras, the ever-present wildebeest. We had some lovely waterbuck sightings yesterday. Nice to see them around. One of this male has got some intentions. May come and examine this female, analyze that urine. You can see his lips going. He's going to be potentially trying to pick up some of that urine and analyze it. There we go. There's that classic phlegm grimace. You see the mouth being held open, lips pulled back. He's analyzing all that species-specific hormonal information contained within that female's urine. But looking at that with the youngster in tow, I think he will fairly swiftly realise that there's not too much worth pursuing from his perspective there. But better safe than sorry. Well done for checking, boy. Gavin DMV wants to know whether or not the twists in the horns of the waterbuck can help with age like you can with the kudu. So if anybody doesn't know about the kudus, on average, it takes about a year and a half or 2 years for a half, or let me try that again. About one complete turn is about half a turn per year. Yes, about half a turn per year in kudus. And a full adult male with about 2.5 twists, so therefore around about 5 years of age. Waterbuck, I don't believe so. There is potentially a way of counting the rings, but I don't know how accurate it is in terms of those little ridges on the horns. I've never actually, if it is true, I don't know the formula that one would use, and I imagine it's is going to be variable based on the genetics, how quickly the animal's growing, the sources of food that it's got. Normally, those ridges are more used in conflict. So, despite having big horns, these antelopes are not trying to stab one another with them. They'll lock horns, and it's more used as a test of strength. So they'll lock horns, and then each of them sort of twist their neck a little bit, and then those ridges lock against one another, and it becomes a way to push against each other to test their strength. And if they didn't have those ridges, their horns would just sort of slip and they'd end up just headbutting each other the whole time. You see those ridges on many of the antelope species. Strangely, not on a bushbuck. Those are smoothed horned. But impala, waterbuck, many of the other antelope. Nyala also smooth, but they've, say, very rarely actually come to blows and prefer to do their little stiff leg slow motion dance. Jackie Darling, you said it's wonderful to hear a fellow Brit. Well, I'm I'm glad. I think my accent is so um, conflicted these days. There's British in there. There's definitely some South African with turn of phrases. A lot of yars and achs that do come into my diction. There may also be a twang of Antipodean language in there as well, having spent some time out in New Zealand. But I find my accent tends to change more depending on who I'm spending time with. If I'm around English people, I become a lot more English very quickly. When I'm in South Africa, I get a lot more of a twang. We pick it up from our surroundings very, very quickly. Jack 2, no. To my knowledge, this waterhole will never dry up. It is pumped, as is often the case for a lot of waterholes that are in front of lodges. Their primary function, whether we agree with it or not, is to attract game, to give guests a great experience. So some waterholes are pumped to ensure that there is a reason for the animals to come down there. It is a very important resource, particularly in the drier winter months. Of course, there's whole reserve management policies that will change from reserve to reserve and from team to team. But as I always say, whether you have an area the size of a football pitch or the area the size of a country, the second you put a fence around it, however large that area is, and you stop those animals from being able to move from one place to another, it becomes our responsibility to manage that area. And if all the waterholes were to dry up, you would very soon lose all of your animals. So what you do want to do is not to have too many waterholes. In lots of cases recently, as we've become more knowledgeable in terms of environmental management, of a lot of previously pumped waterholes being closed. Kruger have closed around 600 pumped waterholes over the last sort of couple of decades. And that inadvertently does actually assist the population, it assists the vegetation, it assists the soil, causes the animals to have more natural movements, more natural patterns, and doesn't benefit certain species over other ones. Lovely stuff here at Tower. So there's an elephant in the background, there was a warthog, we saw the croc, shell ducks, blackwing stilts, so much variety at Tower. Longest legs of any bird in compared to their sort of size in southern Africa, as far as I'm aware, the blackwing stilt. Appropriately named. Yeah, that was a lovely little visit to Tao. It sounds like we may have some giraffes up in El Doño, so let's head back up to Kenya. Two of Africa's most iconic creatures. Oh, I've been very lucky with giraffe drinking at El Doño lately. Been almost a daily occurrence. Juniper, this idea of zebra stripes, do they really dazzle and confuse predators? Well, of course, we will never truly know the real reason for them. It is one of the theories, certainly, and it does work to some extent. Put a lot of stripes all moving in different directions, and it does mess with the predator's ability to uh, pick out a certain individual. It's that whole idea of, sort of schooling fish and safety in numbers. And it certainly does have an effect of making it more difficult um, to track the movement of an animal in terms of working out an interception point if you're also chasing it. We've seen that's been used by humans uh, in the First World War. It was some of the American battleships. They tried painting with different directions of black and white stripes to confuse the opposing forces and their abilities to use trigonometry to work out the best path for any potential projectiles. But more recently, there has been a lot of studies being done on this, and it is now considered that whether it's the reason for it, but it is particularly effective with dealing with flies and biting insects. They've done lots of experiments with horses and putting coats on them. There are some that are black, some that are white, some that are stripy, and monitoring the reaction of insects to those stripes. And it certainly has been shown that it messes with the ability for flies to sort of measure depth perception. The black and the white is confusing to them. They're not quite sure where the surface is. And lots of examples apparently of flies flying towards the zebra, and then not realizing they're right on top of it, flying into it, bumping into it, knocking themselves silly and falling to the floor and having to start the whole process again. So it seems to be that it is particularly effective as a potential controlling mechanism of biting animals, or biting flies and insects. But we also do know that it assists with thermoregulation, identification, lots of other potential theories behind it. Nice opportunity here to see the difference between a male and a female giraffe. So the male on the right, definitely larger, those thicker ossicones, bald on the top. Female ossicones are lifted, and generally not quite as tall and as stockily, strongly built as the giraffe. Sorry, as the male giraffe on the right. And one other fairly obvious difference, which I don't think needs mentioning. Just heard from Free Spirit that there were 3 cheetahs seen earlier here this morning. That would be pretty amazing. Did get a brief view of some lions at, is it Cat Eye Pan? Trying to remember now. About a month or so ago when I was doing this, they were chased off by some elephants, but we saw them very, very briefly in the grass. So you never know what might come a calling. Yeah, it's nice to see some zebra and giraffe. I think we might have some more elephants over at Naledi. Let's go have a look. Small little family group, unless there are any others hiding in the background. So, Callie, you're asking if we see any conflict between antelope species and zebras over territory. No, we don't. In fact, I would say fairly confident saying we see zero conflict. Generally speaking, you'll find animals of different species have no conflict over territory because you can't expect one species to hold an area and then keep all other species out of it. The animal kingdom doesn't work like that. Territorial males will generally only drive away other territorial males and have conflicts with members of their same species, or females for that matter. Leopards, obviously, both male and female are territorial and solitary unless they come together for mating. Zebras, however, are not territorial at all over a piece of land. They roam wherever there's food. The males have their harem system of a few mares that are, be careful how I phrase this, but they own, that they look after, that are in their harem. Excuse me. But they don't, and they are territorial over those females, but they are not territorial over a patch of land. That's why when we see large groups of these animals, we saw it yesterday, at Oldonio when we had, probably between 50 and 100 zebras there. That is not one Hugh Hefner-esque male with all of his mares. There'll be multiple harems of zebra groups that have come together because of the availability of a particular resource. Lots of kicking and gnashing of teeth, certainly, but no territorial disputes over area, just over members. Elephants are the same, of course. Elephants do not hold any territories. They have what is called a home range. Well, those are the two main words that we use to describe the movement of animals. They either have a territory or a home range. The difference between the two being that territories are demarcated, i.e., they are sprayed with urine or dung middens or roaring, as is in the case of lions, some form of advertisement that this is my area that other members of the species can pick up on and either avoid or roll the dice to try and take over that territory. A home range is generally bigger than a territory, but it is not defended and it is not marked in any way, shape, or form. Territorial animals will also have a home range. They'll have a fairly strict core part of their territory, and then they will have a fairly flexible boundary that they may also go into, but it won't form part of their full territory. So all animals have a home range, but not all animals have a territory. Home ranges are going to be very dependent upon availability of resources, of food, of water, of shelter, and of mating opportunities. As but yes, I have been on the receiving end of an elephant's sneeze before. It's one of the perils of getting quite close to these animals on many occasions. They do have a build-up of excessive mucus in that nose to help protect against dust and other things, and occasionally, whether or not is an official sneeze, but yes, they will clear that nose. And I have had the misfortune of being in the firing line of it before. I've never been absolutely coated, but yes, I have received some elephant nasal mucus before. I've been hissed at by a leopard. I've felt the saliva of a leopard on my face before when it hissed at us when it got very, very close to the car. So yes, occasionally we do experience those things a little bit more closely than perhaps we would require. Gavin, you're asking how long the average must period is. So must is the reproductive status that male elephants come into during when it's time to mate. It's a bit of a confusing one, must, and I've tried repeatedly to understand it, spoken to a variety of people, and you get a lot of different answers. Um, Whether or not must is stimulated by picking up the hormones of a female elephant who is in estrus, and that stimulates the males come into must, or whether males come into must as more of a natural process and then are far more attuned to picking up those hormones is something that I've never fully made peace with. I think it's probably a little bit of both. And must periods will change depending on the size, age, and well, so age and dominance levels of that animal. Um, what we do know is that when big dominant bull elephants do come into must, the older ones in their full reproductive prime, so maybe 35 years and up, it is possible for an elephant bull to remain in must for 6 months of the year. So half of the year could be in must. Some younger elephants, a lot less. One of the other reasons they'll stay in must longer is that every time two musting bulls meet, um, generally the submissive of the two, or the one that is less dominant, will come out of must very, very quickly. Those hormones are suppressed by coming into contact with a more dominant animal. So younger elephants generally don't stay in must for very long because they'll inevitably come up against a more formidable adversary, and that will then cause them to not be in must. Gavin also asking if they will mate with multiple females during this time. Yes, they will do if they have the opportunity to. A musting elephant very much has mating on the mind, will hone in on those particular pheromones, and if that involves going from a couple of different herds or between a couple of different herds to have those opportunities, then absolutely remember an animal's goal ultimately is to spread its genetics, and the more genetics it can spread, the better, as far as that animal is concerned. Spas, how far away can male elephants sense an estrusing female? Oh, it's difficult to say. Again, there's many factors. Wind direction being a major one. Which direction is that smell being carried? But from what we know about elephants in general, they potentially have the ability to pick up smells from certainly in excess of 10 kilometers away, potentially more, depending on wind direction and climatic conditions. So hard to say for sure. Um, it may well be that he doesn't pick up the scent of the female itself or herself. What he might do is come across some dung that was put down a day before that the female left. He will smell that, realize that there is the scent of a potentially estrusing female, and then track her based on urine and dung that has been left behind while she's moving. So she could have inadvertently been more than 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers or 50 kilometers away. But if she has left a trail for him to follow, that's another possibility as well. But certainly, elephants have an exceptional sense of smell. But as with everything, there are many, many variables that may play a role in its true efficacy. And it's not just the smells that the female will give off. A female in estrus will also give off what's called a must rumble, we call it, or an estrusing rumble. She will be giving audible cues as well, which will travel potentially very, very large distances. This whole idea of elephants being able to pick up vibrations in the air, vibrations through the ground with their sensitive feet. Stories that these signals have been transmitted over tens of kilometers, 30, 40 kilometers perhaps. So it's not only an olfactory thing, um, but there are other factors in play as well. Very sleepy elephant, just having a bit of a rest, resting his trunk on the side of that. I suppose we'd call it a well more than anything else. Nice soft eyes, enjoying a nice dopey afternoon. DDG differences between male and female elephant bodies. Well, the main ones that we've sort of discussed already is the shape of the head, but it is by no means a definitive rule. Males more rounded, females normally more angular. I would say this animal has quite an angular forehead, but it is a male. I can see that because there's a penile sheath between his back legs. So the safest way to sex an elephant is to look underneath the tummy, look for that penile sheath with the males. Females will have much more obvious mammary glands behind the front legs. Other than that, and just sort of general size, obviously a big female elephant is nowhere near as big as a big male elephant. Males are far larger in terms of shoulder height and general bulk and weight. Um, so really, I would say no. Those are the main differences. You're asking if one has more wrinkles on the body than the other. No, not that I'm aware of. So those are the main things. Look at the shape of the head, and if in doubt, look for the presence of a penile sheath or enlarged mammary glands behind the front legs. Because it's quite difficult, as with most animals, to sex younger individuals. We say with giraffes that males have got the thicker, bald ossicones versus the females. Mentioned it earlier. But if you see two-year-old giraffes, there's no real difference in height between them. And a male's ossicones have not solidified, they've not ossified properly, they haven't worn down the hair on the top of their heads with mock fighting with other males as part of sort of learning and establishing pecking order and hierarchy. And so, again, if in doubt, look for the more obvious signs, I would suggest. Okay, from some elephants to some more elephants, we're going to head over to the eastern side of South Africa now to Tembe Elephant Park. This is one of my favourite cameras from an aesthetic point of view. A lot greener, closer to the eastern coast, more humid, potential of more rain on this side of the country. And a beautiful tree in the middle of the waterhole. It's such a pretty expanse to enjoy this one. It's like somebody have a painting, little reed bed on the left, big tree in the water on the right. But not a park that I've ever been to. Perhaps one day. Another lovely tusked elephant there, having a drink. It's an impala and a nyala. We don't see a nyala all that often, or we do often see them here at Tembe, but nice to see some nyala out in the open with those white stripes. This elephant just clearing a path for himself. Yeah, no, indeed, it is starting to look a little bit drier at Tembe, but if you compare it to many of the other feeds that we're lucky enough to see, with the exception of sort of up there in Kenya, it's a little bit different. But if you compare it to Madikwe and Nkoro and to Juma, see it. There's a lot more green here than there is in some of the other locations, which is normal for this time of year. Interesting little sort of lack of pigmentation towards the tip of this elephant's trunk. You can see it's slightly pinker, particularly when he arced it up over his head just now. It's got a bit more pink, so there's got a lack of melanin towards the end of the trunk. Not sure if there will be any reason behind that. It shouldn't be much of a problem. Possibly a little bit more prone to a bit of sunburn. So very much taking his time, enjoying this drink. Again, you can just see that little bit of pink there on the side of the trunk. Slightly unusual, but say nothing to be concerned about. See, that's a surprisingly deep shade of pink from just a little lack of melanin. I think that chunk has got a little bit burnt in the sun. Looks like me after about 5 minutes in the African sun if I was to take my shirt off. This area is not normally used to it, to the extreme temperatures and extreme UV rays. That looks a little bit sore. It's after sun in there. Maybe that's why he's enjoying splashing around in the water there. It's quite soothing. Yes, elephants do lack that ability to create their own sunscreen, like we see in hippos. And we had a discussion last month about why birds don't get sunburnt, things like vultures, the production of that substance, gadusol, which seems to be a natural sunblock that's created by the skin. To my knowledge, elephants do not create this because they normally don't have to, because they've got that very thick skin. It's already dark, which will protect against the UV rays. Although most animals that I know of, having done some research, do produce this gadusol, so they might have some. One of the reasons that they do tend to coat themselves in mud as well. So anime, I see you were just asking about that pinkish color. So ultimately, it's for whatever reason, there's a lack of melanin in that area of the elephant's trunk, which is the darker pigment that would normally absorb a lot of those UV rays. For whatever reason, the elephant seems to be lacking some of it in the end of its trunk. And we can see how ruddy that pink has become because it is more susceptible to a bit of sunburn. Why it is there, I don't know. It'll just be a little genetic defect, if we can call it that. But it's just an area of the body where, for whatever reason, the melanin has not concentrated. A complete absence of melanin in the body would be albinism. Well, we've discussed albinism in elephants before. The only way to identify true albino is by having that animal having a red eye. That denotes a complete lack of melanin within the body. Otherwise, a lot of the paler animals that we see, we do get is known as leucism or being leucistic. There have certainly been reports of leucistic elephants, these sort of pink elephants. We see it occasionally in antelopes. I have seen leucistic bushbuck. I've seen a leucistic eland, a leucistic buffalo, a leucistic impala. They're very few and far between. The white lions, of course, is also a form of leucism, but those animals generally do not live such long and prosperous lives. A, they struggle in the sun, and B, they stick out more to predators, far less likely to get to full sexual maturity, less likely to pass on those genetics. And that's why there are so few of them in comparison to the rest. It's what we call a recessive gene. So in something like a leucistic impala, which have that sort of three-toned coat, so the whiter belly, the more orange along the flank, and then the darker orange on the top, you'd still be able to see those divisions. It's not pure snowy white. it's more of a cream color, and it would be a darker cream color, a lighter cream color, and a white color. So you would still be able to see different shades. The opposite of that, of course, is melanism, where an animal has an excess of melanin. So the classic sort of black panther or a black leopard, those are obvious examples of melanism. If you've ever seen close-up pictures of a black panther, you can still see the rosettes or the melanistic jaguar as it really is. You can still see the patterning on the skin, but it's just far more subtle because everything is dark. It's more commonly seen in birds. The Gabar goshawk is probably the most famous example of it. In southern Africa, I wouldn't say it's common, but it's seen regularly enough to have its own pictures in most bird books. There's a decent chance to see a melanistic goshawk. I've seen melanistic Jacobin's cuckoos. I've seen fork-tailed drongos that are sort of patchy white and black. We do see some strange pigment issues. Yeah, but hopefully this boy can get a nice little coating of mud on his trunk, protect it from the sun. I think we're going to head back up to Kenya and Aldonyo, but a nice little visit to Tembe. It's looking at the giraffe saying, "What are you doing? Why don't you just have a trunk like me? It makes life so much easier." Now we're taking an opportunity there to do a little bit of analysis. The simple fact that we seem to have a male and a female giraffe that have become separated from their groups, or that very loose social structure that they have, does suggest that this male is in the process of courting this female. He will often follow her around, trying to make sure that no other males have an opportunity if she is indeed in estrus. Zebra, quite possibly this is the stallion leading the way. Often the stallion will lead his mares down to water, just in case there are any predators hanging around by the water. Of course, Sean, how do elephants tell the difference between threatening and non-threatening situations? I suppose what's a threatening situation? I suppose experience, gut feel, scent. I mean, what is a threatening situation to an elephant? Really, with the exception of people and maybe another rival, similarly sized elephant. Or, I'm trying to think of what would be considered a threatening situation for an elephant. I think to some extent it's going to be gut feel and experience would be the simplest answer to that, or as far as that's cop out. But elephants aren't really threatened by much. The unknown, and older elephants will gather more confidence, just like we do when we're younger. Things are a bit scary, and then we are constantly exposed to those things, and realise which ones are a true threat and which ones are not. And there will be character differences between individuals as well. I've worked with certain elephants, say, which are very relaxed in what could potentially be a stressful situation, and others which can become very aggressive or very skittish. A lot of it will just come down to personality. Well, this is similar to what we saw yesterday. Big group of zebra, more and more coming in. We should get some interesting interactions. I'm sure there'll be some hooves flying shortly, particularly as half the waterhole is cut up. It's fairly sedate thus far. We had a lot more zebras than this yesterday, but we had a lot more interaction. Whether or not they're just a bit cautious because of the presence of the elephant, but you can see more and more streaming in from the back. We'll see how long the elephant will put up with this. Imagine the zebras will just wait their turn. This little tractor So nothing has come to blows just yet. Very cool to see how this elephant is just peering over all of these zebras. A little David and Goliath moment. That's opportunity to see how sexy zebra. Oh, the one who just caused a little bit of fracas there was the male. I'm going to point that out because it's the easiest way to look at the rump. So if you look at that one on the far left, you can see a fairly broad black stripe going vertically down from underneath the tail. That's the female. And the males have a much, much thinner black stripe, almost no black whatsoever. So the one on the right, no, it's really too difficult to explain it. We need to wait for them to all be standing still with bottoms facing us. Yeah, look for the broadness of that black stripe vertically from under the tail is the easiest way to do it. Eric, I don't know. We don't often see breeding herds of elephants here at Oldonio. There must be a reason for it, but so it's not an area that I know personally particularly well, so I have no doubt there are breeding herds there. I'm sure we have seen breeding herds here, but it does seem to be more common to have individual bulls, particularly. Why that is, I couldn't honestly say. It may just be the rhythm of nature. It might change as we move throughout the year. A lot of it will be to do with availability of food, what's in a particular area. If those matriarchs know of better areas this time of year to go for food and for water, then that might be why they have disappeared for now. This elephant very much staked claim to this waterhole in no hurry to move off. All the ones yesterday were also drinking from that exact same spot. I'm sure that's the inflow pipe that he has decided is very much his own. Zebras seem to be quite skittish. Finally, I've had enough to drink. Time for a bit of a bath now to scrub in some of that mud. You should see some spraying himself, applying the sunblock. Such a simple way to keep cool. Cover yourself in cool water and cool mud. So all those wrinkles on an elephant's body do come into play. They increase the surface area, create all those little nooks and crannies for that cool water and cool mud to settle into, be absorbed into the skin, protect the skin. I say even on a microscopic level, the elephant's skin is also wrinkled, creating lots of little tips and surfaces that all aid in cooling that massive bulk in the hot African sun. He's having difficulty dragging himself away. It's like, I've got a perfectly good source of fresh water here. Why would I want to leave? Interesting little flicking motion of the tip of the elephant's trunk there. I normally associate that sort of motion when they've got trying to flick off dust off grass and things during the summer, but almost as if, it's a sort of shaking water off the tips of your fingers sometimes. I don't know if I've ever noticed an elephant do that before. Interesting to see if he does it again. But interesting little behavioral variations and ticks that individual animals have. Ticks as in not parasites, but little muscular movements that may be unique to that animal. But definitely drinking his fill. He's almost doing it out of principle now. A big elephant bull like this needs a good 100 to 150 litres of water a day. That's not far off the size of a standard bathtub. A huge amount of fluid required. And we were talking about must earlier. The elephant bull is in must. You can add more to that as well because of all the fluid loss from those temporal secretions, from the dripping of the urine that you can see on the back legs of a musting elephant. Ah, finally, we've had enough. Oh, Julie, I couldn't tell you which butterflies we've got. There are so many species of butterfly in the world, and so there are so many of them are so unique to specific areas. There are species of butterflies that only exist in an area a couple of hectares wide in the world. They are very susceptible to climatic change and very specific weather requirements. So what those butterflies are, I couldn't even tell you. I can't see them closely enough. And even if I had a butterfly book and a photograph of it, unless it was one of the more obvious species, I would be seeking assistance from a lepidopterian or a professor of lepidoptery, however you is the correct way of saying it, to make absolutely sure. I do have a butterfly book for Southern Africa, but if you look at the blue family or the copper family, there are page after page of them that at a glance look so similar, that it's very difficult to know for sure. These look like possibly something out of the white family, um, but yeah, we'd have to get a much closer look, and some knowledge, particularly of the area, would be helpful. I'm sure there will be African monarchs up there. There often are other common ones that you see, the bush browns, the various whites, the orange tip whites and the purple tip whites, the African migrant, as well, African vagrant or migrant, can't remember now. The cabbage whites, these are more common in southern Africa, but I just don't know up in Kenya, I'm afraid. They're also one of those things that are quite hard to learn because they're generally only around at a small time of year. You don't really see them much in the winter. They're a bit like wildflowers. I've always struggled with wildflowers because every year you find them, you identify them, you learn their names, and then they disappear for 8 months. And unfortunately, my brain, it seems, is not good enough to recall them the next season or the next year when they return, and I have to start the process all over again. I've been doing that for well over a decade, identifying the same flowers and going, "Oh, I've seen this before. What's it called?" But I cannot remember. My long-term memory for flowers apparently is not very good. Okay, well, as this elephant disappears into the distance, we're going to head back down to Tower Waterhole in Madikwe, see what's there. Many more elephants. Look at that very angular forehead of the female on the right. So we've talked about that a few times. Another one on the left there, the younger one. That's what we mean by a very angular forehead when you see them side on like that, very square shaped. Looks like it's probably a male, the one in the middle at the back, just because he's much bigger than the surrounding one. So if he was turned side on, maybe we can compare that forehead silhouette. Yeah, see, much less angular. That's just a young male, a teenager, but already towering above his female counterparts, bulldozing a path through the middle of them all. Interesting that they're all gathering around such a small area there. I wonder if there's an interesting smell on the ground. Yeah, but there's young males breaking everything off and breaking everything up. Betty, elephants can find water in the dry season by a couple of different ways. So, one, through smell. They can smell the water. We know that for a fact. And so there are studies suggesting that they can smell water from 15, maybe 20 kilometers away. They have incredibly sensitive noses, more sensitive than any bloodhound. The oh, look at that. The number of smell receptors in an elephant's nose is enormous. The structure of the nose helps. There are certain structures that you find in these sort of scrolls of bones that you get in dogs, which have five. They begin with T. I can't think what they're called at the moment. Elephants have eight, and just with the simple size of that nose, the nasal epithelium, which contains all those smell receptors, is so large that they have an incredible sense of smell. They've been used to find landmines and all sorts of interesting things. So smell definitely, and the other one is memory. That's why elephants do so well. They have excellent memories. The matriarchs remember that under times of stress, where is the food? Where is the water? Where are the permanent springs? Where are the pumped water holes? There's one rolling around on the floor. It's one of the reasons that elephants are so successful and so reliant on that family group. That knowledge is passed down to generation, and a herd is reliant upon those members of the group that recall where those resources are available under times of stress. This little one flexing his muscles. We've got a bit of a roll around, greeted a couple of them, had a little bit of a push and a shove. Play with me. As he's bored and looking for attention. Come on, let's go. I want to go and play in the water. I'm hungry. I want an ice cream. And the older female stepped in. I wonder if she's going to have a word. Shame, I feel a bit sorry for this little one, clambering for attention and everybody's ignoring him. Fine, I'll get up. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Haley. It is amazing to see these little elephants. They're just barrels of personality. Such a delight to watch. They just make people smile, and that in this world is a wonderful, wonderful thing to be able to do. But it looks like he may have got his wish. The herd's decided to move on. And that's most likely the matriarch that was leading the herd there. That's what we'd expect. It's usually the biggest, oldest female. So she is the one who has all of that knowledge of where to find water, where to find specific foods. very much the heart of this group of elephants. And if that was the little one, maybe he did just want a drink, got tired of waiting. Matriarch said, "Fine, come on then. I shall stand and watch, go down and have your drink." Well, that was very special to see that little youngster giving us a little bit of a show. We're going to go over to Nkoropan and Zabi Sands and see what is afoot. Now we're back to our saddle builder store. It's potentially eradicated all forms of life from that waterhole with her voracious appetite that we saw earlier, and now it's time for a bit of a preen. Amazing flexibility in that neck. Interesting where she's cocking her head there. I wonder if she was looking at something up in the sky, but choosing to just look with one eye up to the sky, with the eyes on the side of the head there, perhaps. Maybe there was something flying above. Yeah, interesting. She keeps doing that with her head, just turning the angle. I'm sure she's looking at something out of one eye up in the sky. But definitely the female, you can clearly see that yellow eye. The female's yellow eye, male's dark brown eye with a little wattle underneath the chin, which we are not seeing in this case. Rather strange to square onto the camera like that. Look how flexible that neck is. You see that darker patch? Oh, look at that for a bit of a bit of stretching and a bit of stalk yoga. That dark patch on the chest will be the brood patch. So no feathers there. Access to more blood vessel rich membranous skin, and when sitting on the eggs, that will just impart a little bit of heat and help the incubation process. But that was quite the little flex that we saw there. I think I'm going to be doing some little bit more research on bird necks. It's suddenly interested me just how flexible they can be. They have many more cervical vertebrae than we do. Of course, we have seven, as do all mammals. Some birds can have into the 20s, so that does allow for a lot more flexibility, certainly. But there must be some other adaptations to allow it to be manipulated in the way that we just saw there. Always fun to dig down into these little intricacies, particularly of physiology and behavior. You're being harassed by this plover, this lapwing. Well, we've had a preen, we've had a stretch. It looks like it's time to get back on the hunt. We are nearly out of time now. I've just noticed we've only got 3 or 4 minutes left. Ryle saying thank you for the great show. I'm glad you've enjoyed it, Ryle. We've seen some lovely sights today. Some beautiful bull elephants drinking up in Kenya and in Tembe. Some nice waterbuck that we saw, and the giraffe, zebras. I think probably my favourite today though has been this stork. So maybe fitting that we're going to almost start and end with the same animal. I just think they're such spectacular birds. I do enjoy my birds. Um, and there are some pretty impressive ones: the cory bustards, the lappet-faced vultures, of course, the ground hornbills, Pell's fishing owl. Um, but for me, there are not many things more striking and more impressive to look at than a saddle-billed stork. So, as I said before, potentially very few of them left these days. So, always an honour to see one. And let's hope that they I'll continue, or I continue to see them as regularly as I do. And let's hope that this female finds herself a mate if she doesn't have one at the moment. Well, that's a bit of full circle there. We started with some elephants and stork. It looks like we've got some more elephants coming in, but we are inside the last minute of today's live at the waterhole. Thanks so much for joining me and for your questions and your comments. Don't forget, the fun doesn't stop here though. straight from here, you can go and catch up with the teams at Juma and Amakala and hear all about their plans for this afternoon. And then we will have our sunset safaris, catch up with all those characters. The stork's thinking, no, I shall go the other way, thinking better of it. But what a nice way to finish. But yeah, almost done for the day. Thanks, everybody. And I think Chad will be with you for live at the Waterhole tomorrow. I will be back in a few days. So I will catch up with you all then.
Well, a very good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on our highlight show once again, coming directly here from the Northern Sabi Sands at a beautiful property known as Juma. My name is Cedric, and behind the camera with me we've got Muscles and Paul. Well, in the next 30 minutes, we'll be just discussing exactly what's going to be or what's happened over